Okay, we're in our survey of Christian evidences. We've covered page 1 of your outline, Roman numerals 1 and 2, the many causes and faces of unbelief. And then we talked about the relationship of knowledge, faith, biblical faith, that is. And now we're on Roman numeral 3. And we're looking at, we're going to consider under Roman numeral 3, 7 lines of evidence that warrant the conclusion that an eternal supernatural creator, God, exists. And frankly, it's the only logical conclusion that one can come to. And so we were well into our first one here. Matter demands a maker, and in other words, we refer to this as the cosmological argument. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. The universe is here. Matter exists. Cosmos is the word, the Greek word for this universe, and so it's here. Matter is here. Matter exists. The material world exists. How do you explain it? If there was always nothing, if at any time there was nothing, well, there would still be nothing without some way, some creative power or force. And so we're looking at what's called the law of cause and effect. We're talking about the cosmological argument. If you recall from last week, that states that every material effect, every physical effect, the things that are of this world, must have an adequate, that is, obviously something that's more powerful than it is, greater than it is, must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. That is, the cause obviously has to come before, at least at the same time as the effect. It has to be greater than the effect. And when we're talking about this law, we're only talking about the material universe in which we live. Sometimes people will look at this argument and say, well, you've gotten into an illogical situation of infinite regress. That is, well, this caused that, and that caused that, and that caused that. You just keep going on back and back, and then you say, God caused, all of this. Well, what caused God? No, that's not the law. This law only applies to material things, to matter. It doesn't apply to mind or the spiritual realm. So that's an illogical conclusion to look for the cause of God, because He's not subject to this argument. And so when we talk about what caused or what gave rise to the universe, I think last week we postulated there's only 3 possible answers. 1, the universe is eternal, that is, it's always existed. The things that you see around you, the things that you touch and feel and so forth on a daily basis. Number 2, it's not eternal, but created itself out of nothing. It just sprung out of nothing. Or 3, the universe is not eternal, did not spring out of nothing, did not create itself, but instead was created by someone outside of and superior to itself. And so the first question we asked, is the universe eternal? And there was a time when many in the scientific world argued that, and they thought that it was, but that's not really an argument that's taken very seriously anymore, because it violates the second law of thermodynamics. That is, the law of increasing entropy, as it's sometimes called, which means that, simply put, what? Everything's wearing out. Everything's running down. Energy is becoming less and less available for use. And so it's like a clock. And so if a clock is running down, that means one time it was fully what? Wound up. And there's going to be a time when it's going to do what? Stop. It's going to quit running. And so that's why most scientists understand that, well, it can't be eternal, because I think as we left last week, just look around you. And of course, the theory of evolution violates this particular law the second thermal. And we'll talk about that some more. But, you know, evolution teaches that we're going from chaos to order. Well, the second law of thermodynamics tells you we're going from order to chaos. Things are becoming less orderly, more random, the longer this earth stands. And so, it's not eternal. There will be a time if God lets it go, which I doubt He would, but there would be a time when the whole universe would suffer what's called a heat death. There'd be no energy left. In fact, I know He won't, because I know when Noah came out of that ark, what promise did He make to Noah? All these climate change people that get up in the morning fretting and worrying. And here the God of heaven told Noah what? There will always be seed time and harvest as long as this earth stands. I don't worry about it. The earth becoming too hot for me to live, or too cold for me to live, or whatever. Or the ocean. Although I would like for the ocean to get closer to here. That would be fine. If it rose, well, we're only about 260 feet above sea level, so if it rose about 200 feet and the beach was at Tupelo, Mississippi, that would be fine. But nevertheless, I don't anticipate that. Well, did it create itself out of nothing? And again, the law of causality says that you've got to have a cause, an anterior and superior cause. That things just don't pop out of nothing. And while evolutionists understand this and will admit that, they can't, it's the only thing they have left. They have to hold to something that doesn't make sense, even though, no matter how absurd that it is. But it, of course, violates the first law of thermodynamics, which says that matter is neither being created nor destroyed. Let me read you some comments. Y'all remember Stephen Hawking? He died not too long ago. Famous atheistic cosmologist stated on national TV in 2011, quote, "Nothing caused the Big Bang." Okay, it just happened. He then co-authored a book in which he stated bodies, now get this, bodies such as stars and black holes cannot just appear out of nothing, but a whole universe can. Okay. I think most of you are familiar with Dan Barker. I think that's the one that Kyle Butt debated 2 or 3 years ago. Dan Barker, he's now one of the leading atheists of our day. He was asked, do you really believe that something came from nothing? And he said yes. I mean, that's how illogical, because what is their option? Go back to our Roman numeral 1. Causes of atheism. If you have a bias and don't want to believe in God, you will latch on to anything that doesn't make sense. I was looking, I had some pretty good quotes here. One of the world's leading atheists, Richard Dawkins, in 2012 on Australian national TV was asked, how is it that something as enormous as the universe came from nothing? He said, of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Jethro. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. Okay? Well, aren't you scientific? You're the people of common sense, of rationality. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Well, yes, something mysterious did give rise to the origin of the universe. I will admit that. And so, as he says, it's counterintuitive. It's not in line with common sense. And yet they hang on to this, that it popped out of nothing, because they have nothing to hang on to, no matter how silly it sounds. So, that's not an option. It violates the first law of thermodynamics, and if there was always nothing, there would still be nothing. We all understand that. So what about option number 3? Was the universe created? Well, okay. You can pretty much boil down everything that exists to one of two things, right? Matter or what? What's my other option? It's either matter, it's made of atoms, like our physical universe, or what? What's my other option? What other realm is it? Spiritual, yeah. Mind. It's either mind or matter. Right? It's your only two options. Well, the argument goes something like this. Everything that exists is either matter or mind. Something exists now, so something eternal has always existed. And so that something eternal has to be either mind or matter. Well, we've just determined that what's not eternal? Matter. Physical universe in which you live and of which you're a part. And so that only leaves me with what? Mind. Here's another way this argument sometimes is put. Everything that exists is either dependent, that is contingent, or independent, non-contingent. And so if the universe is not eternal, then that makes it what? Is it contingent or non-contingent? Is it independent or dependent? What about the universe in which we live? It's not a trick question. Contingent means it depends on something else for its viability and origin. Is the universe contingent or not? Absolutely, it's contingent. And it is dependent. It's dependent upon what? Well, I go into Hebrews, I know what it's dependent upon. What does the writer of Hebrews say? Why does this ball still spin? Why does this universe still exist? It is upheld by what? By the word of his power. It's definitely dependent. I just told you that. It means it depends upon something else or its origin or existence. You're contingent. I hate to tell you that, but you are. So, the universe is not eternal. It's dependent and contingent. And therefore, it owes its origin to something that is not. Something that is independent and something that's not contingent upon anything for its origin or its existence or its purpose. And that, of course, is God. We won't get into this, but there's a lot of writings out there on it about the mind. You know, a lot of times atheists will say, well, you know, the mind is just due to chemical processes in that brain. That's not true. Can you separate the librarian from the library? Are they the same thing? This is not hard. Think about it. Is the library the same thing as the librarian? No, it's not.
I've already told my husband I'm not talking.
There's a lot of interesting reading out there on this. In fact, there's a lot of interesting reading. Have you ever thought about where information comes from? An atheist can't explain that. What is information? Is information, I mean, can I put my hands on information? Knowledge? No. It's part of the mind. It's part of the consciousness of which they can't explain its origins. So, I've only got one option here, and that it was created by a cause interior to and superior to itself. That's our option. And so that's the law of causality. That's the law of cause and effect, the cosmological argument, if you will. All right? Matter demands a maker. Well, what else? Life demands a life giver. How many of you have ever seen life just pop into existence? Does the puppy at the pound pop into existence? What about the bacteria on these chair seats you're sitting on? Well, there's bacteria all over there. You can't see it, but it's there. And you know, the silly thing about this is that the law of biogenesis, that is, bio meaning life, genesis meaning beginning, says that in nature life only comes from previous life of its own kind. Well, where did I hear that before? Yeah, Genesis chapter 1, right? Law of biogenesis is stated over and over and over again. Let's see, look. God said, Verse 24. Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind. Cattle, creepy thing, beast of the earth, each according to its kind. Go back up to verse 11. Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to what? Its kind. I don't plant apple trees and expect to get pears, do I? I don't expect a pig to have a litter and horses to come out, do I? Not the way it works. It's the law of biogenesis. Life comes from life and only from its kind. And the atheist knows this. And in fact, if you, when you were in grade school or junior high school, one of the biggest names in science that you studied was who? That disproved the theory of spontaneous generation. Up until that time, people thought life could just pop into existence on its own. And who just debunked that? And every time you pick up a carton of milk at the store, you look on there and it says, this milk was pasteurized. Louis Pasteur, of course. Studied him in school. Killed the idea of spontaneous generation, and yet, modern day atheists, it's all they got. So they have to believe in something that's been... And understand, when there is when a law, something is in science is called a law, that means after all the thousands and thousands of experiments they've done and all the times they've observed it in nature, they know of no exception. It always happens. That's why they call it the law of the first and second law of thermodynamics. This is why we call it the law of biogenesis. No one's ever seen it happen any different. No experiment has revealed that it happens any different than that. That's why it's called a law. And so year after year, observational science comes to the same conclusion. Let me read you a couple of quotes. Here's an evolutionist from 1933, John Sullivan. It said, "It became an accepted doctrine that life never arises except from life. And so far as the actual evidence goes, this is still the only possible conclusion." You say, oh, yes, 1933. Well, you've heard of George Gaylord Simpson, eminent evolutionist, 1965. Said, "There is no serious doubt that biogenesis is the rule, that life comes only from other life, that a cell, the unit of life, is always and exclusively the product or offspring of another cell." I like what this guy wrote. You say, well, that was 1981. Actually, 2009. Here's a guy, an evolutionist, Neil Shubin, in a book in 2009 says, "I can share with you one true law that all of us can agree upon. This law is so profound that most of us take it completely for granted. Yet it is the starting point for almost everything we do in paleontology, developmental biology, and genetics. This biological law of everything is that every living thing on the planet had parents. Every person you've ever known has biological parents, as does every bird, salamander, or shark you have ever seen. To put it in more precise form, every living thing sprang from some parental genetic information." I remember when Brother Warren used to debate atheists, he would always ask this question: which came first? A woman or a baby? Evolutionist. Well, life in the natural world comes only from pre-existing life. It didn't come from... And so we get this idea, and it's and the crazy thing is, you get these guys admitting this law, and yet you pick up a high school textbook that talks about life springing from mud and rocks and non-living things. That violates what Louis Pasteur debunked. And yet, when he gets to that chapter on the beginning, it's all just thrown out the window. You know. Evolutionist and Harvard University professor George Wald admitted in an article, this was 1954, that there are only two options for life's origin: spontaneous generation, which has been disproven, and two, the only alternative to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation. There is no third position. But the evolutionists admit They're unwilling to accept the alternative belief. You see, I know it can't happen this way, but my only option is to accept that there's a God in heaven who demands something of me that I must answer to one day. And the crazy thing about that is that, I mean, you'd think that intuitively a person ought to be able to say, no matter how much I deny something, doesn't mean it's not going to happen, or it's not real, it doesn't exist. I mean, I can put God out into the back of my mind my whole life. That still doesn't help me after I'm gone. So, the law of biogenesis, life comes only from life, and that after its kind. Life demands a life giver. Well, we're also familiar, of course, you've heard of this one before, the teleological argument. Design demands a designer. Well, paintings demand what? If I see a painting, I know that there was what? A painter. If I read a poem, there was a poet. If I see a building or a house, I know that at some point along the way there was an architect. And so I know when I see cars and computers and pianos and projectors and all of that, yeah. There's engineers and there's technicians and there's all kinds of people that design and put them together, right? And yet I'm told that the big universe I live in totally defies that law. That design demands a designer. That's right. So, what I used to do in this study, in our old outline from 2014, I would spend quite a bit of time looking at the most amazing designed creature in this universe, which is who? Human beings. And so, if you look at your recommended reading, we're not going to do that this time. I'm going to refer you to The Human Body, Accident or Design by Wayne Jackson, and there's some other things listed there. But you can go through and we used to talk about this, you can go through every system. Musculoskeletal system, the blood, the heart and the blood system, the central nervous system, the brain. When you read evolutionary writings, the interesting thing is to read what they say about the human eye.
About what?
The human eye.
The human eye.
There is nothing that we've ever developed that comes close to the complexity of an eye. I'm talking about telescopes, cameras, iPhone cameras, even if they have 3 lenses on them, whatever. Don't come close to the human eye. So you want to do some more study on design, I recommend that to you. But I'll read you one thing. This is something I had not come across before, but let me read you this. I thought this was kind of interesting. One example. The ratio of the mass of an electron to a proton is 1 to 1836. You know what protons and electrons are, don't you? They're inside every atom. So 1 to 1836, which means that a proton is 1,836 times more massive than an electron. Even with this mass difference, however, electrons and protons, you're talking about things we can't see. Things have to be seen under an electron microscope. Even with this mass difference, however, electrons and protons have the same electrical charge. Scientists suggest that if the electrical charge of the electron were altered, now get this, because it reminds you of some of the things we used to talk about in this. If the electrical charge of the electron were altered by 1 part in 100 billion, our bodies would instantly explode. That's how precise. And so it reminds me of all those things we also used to talk about. Just take the Earth, the rotation on its axis and its tilt and its orbit around the sun. And you talk about if it was off, like 1/8 of an inch or something, burn up, freeze. I mean, that's how precise things are. And here's the interesting thing about evolutionists. They use this kind of language in their writings. Finely tuned, complex, design. Australian atheistic astrophysicist, you may have heard his name, Paul Davies, has admitted that the universe, which of course is supposed to be the result of mindless, random processes, is, quote, uniquely hospitable. That's the kind of terminology they use. Uniquely hospitable, remarkable, and ordered in an intelligible way. He used the term fine-tuned properties of the universe. In a 2008 National Geographic article titled Biomimetics Designed by Nature, the word design is used like at least 7 times. The author uses words like sophistication and clever devices. Do you know what biomimicry is? Does anybody know what biomimicry is? Have you ever read about that? That's the latest craze in the scientific world. That's where when you're trying to accomplish, humans are trying to accomplish something or design something, they try to copy what? What are they trying to copy? Where is the design the best? Nature. They're looking at nature. I was reading about them trying to copy the flight apparatus of a dragonfly. You ever watched a dragonfly? You ever watched them? They can do it this way and that way and this way and that way. We got nothing that can do that. And they'll study this stuff from every angle and try to come up with better designs for whatever industry they're in. That's called biomimicry. Because nobody does it better than nature. I mean, planes can't fly like birds can. And so the design is unbelievable. One evolutionist, Jerry Cohen, said, nature resembles a well-oiled machine. The one more learns about plants and animals, the one more marvels at how well their design fits their way of life. You know, sometimes they talk about, they'll talk about the fact that, well, we're evolved. See, humans are evolved because there's so much of our bodies that are like some of the things in animals. Yes. Why is that? Why are our bodies similar in many ways to animals? Why do we?
We have the same.
So we can research, learn.
But why is our physical makeup in so many ways like the animal world? Yeah, but I mean, think about, where do we all live? We all live in the same place. We all live on the same ball. We're breathing the same air. We're drinking the same water. We're eating the same food. We are all part of the same environment. Yes, we're going to be similar in some of those things to be in the same environment. I suppose it's kind of like watching a sci-fi movie, you know? Why do aliens look so weird? Because they don't live here. They live in some other weird environment, right? That makes sense. They're breathing something else. Or they're not breathing at all, I don't know. But we're all part of the same environment. Yeah, we're going to have some of the same things. The dictionary defines design. You go to Merriam-Webster's and American Heritage. The purposeful or inventive arrangement of parts or details. Deliberate, purposive plan. Now that's the word they use for nature. It's design. Paul Davies went on to say, our universe seems, I like this, just right for life. It looks as if a super intellect has been monkeying with physics. And this one I love the most. This is my favorite quote from a skeptic by the name of Michael Shermer. The reason people think that a designer created the world is because it looks designed. Thank you. 3,000 years ago, let's turn over to Psalm chapter 19.
demonstrates the extent to which men will go to
Yeah.
avoid the obvious.
Absolutely. If you're absolutely decided that you cannot accept God, then there's no depth of silliness that you won't see. Look at Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament expanse shows his handiwork.
That's the time.
The design of God's work shows his glory. And if you go into Isaiah 6:3, it says the whole earth is full of his glory. This says the heavens and the expanse. Isaiah says the earth does. Well, what does it do? Look at verse 2. Day unto day utters speech. Night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. What does that say? It says that the heavens above me and the earth in which I live testify every day
Yeah.
that there is a Creator.
Creator. This is where the sun goes down and comes back up.
That song we sang is based on these verses. The spacious firmament. What did Paul say in Romans chapter 1? For the invisible attributes of him are clearly seen. They were perceived from the beginning. Well, somebody had to be there. We'll talk about that. Somebody had to be here to perceive it. Hebrews 3:4 says, every house is built by someone. Look, we all drive by houses. We know it had a builder, had an designer, architect, contractor. He who built all things is who? God. Right. So, design demands a design. Teleological argument. Well, intelligence demands an intelligent creator. You consider yourself to be intelligent? Yeah. Intelligence is defined as the capacity to acquire and apply knowledge. The ability to learn or understand things or to deal with new or difficult situations. Man, compared to creation around him, has a high degree of intelligence. There's no question. Where'd that come from? I mean, I was watching, I was flipping the other night and I came across that movie, Apollo 13, Tom Hanks, based on the actual events.
What movie was that, sir?
Apollo 13,
Oh, okay, yeah.
based on the actual events when they had that accident and they were able to make it back. But in watching that movie, I thought to myself, those guys in that kind of hostile environment. I mean, we had the ability, even in the 60s, to calculate and put in those computers and to send those guys 240,000 miles into space and back. Now, that takes some intelligence. Yeah. Do you have something?
And I couldn't occur with you more while you was talking there. And I know this is Monday, but I remember when I went through Officer Kennedy School, we got to the basics. You didn't have a gas station map. You had a map, topographical, contour lines, convex lines, and you had to have enough sense to figure that thing out. Now I'm being a little facetious here, but I'm simply saying you got a map, and all that thing has on it is contour line, convex lines, grids. And you got to figure out where you are or where you're going. It's not an easy chore. And so to navigate from here to the moon and then bring them back is almost beyond comprehension. But I'm not through. Here's something that I've often wondered about. Because I hear this from time to time about folk coming taking somebody's job. I don't believe anybody can take anything from me other than some possessions. You can't take anything that I possessed internally. And you can't possess something, you can't Well, what am I trying to say here? When I grew up as a young black kid down in north central Florida, I often wondered because the agriculture industry depended on black folks, it seemed to me at that time. And we would start in, it would start in Immokalee, Florida, which is near Miami. And all of the various vegetables would come in, including the watermelons. And then its season, if you will, would move all the way up Florida until it got up to north central Florida, or out to Oklahoma, or out to Arkansas. So I've often wondered, suppose all of the green beans came in at the same time. Suppose all the corn came in at the same time. We of all people would be most miserable, but they don't.
Yeah.
It's got to be some design there. Now, I'm not getting off on the great designer. That's not what I'm saying. But we're in the fall season now. It seems to have came on time.
What do they call this? Smartphone. Smartphone. It didn't make itself up. They put some smarts to make a smartphone. In fact, it's amazing to me that with satellites, GPS and all that, I can put an address in here thousands of miles away. And this thing, I can follow this little map thing, and it shows me exactly where I'm at.
I wish we had those about
I bet you did.
We're going to try to figure out where
You know, if you ever study some military history from the past, like the Civil War, and you really understand that most of the battles were won and lost really on mistakes because of horrible communication. I mean, communication was done by horseback. You know, the general gave an order for this line to move over here. Some guy had to take the order over there. You know, it's kind of interesting, you know, what all happened. But smartphones, and the point I'm making is that, you know, it takes some pretty good intelligence. I mean, Mark was a farmer. I mean, and I know his tractor was probably just you know, whatever.
Drive itself.
You can get a tractor now that pretty much drives itself. GPS turns. You know, I'm told they go down the end of the road, they turn, they go back the other way. And it's all based on satellites. So pretty intelligent stuff. And there's a pretty big gulf between us and the animal kingdom, right? But animals do have some intelligence. I mean, I can teach my dog to do a lot of things.
Right. That telephone has the capacity to launch the shuttle.
Yeah. It's amazing. Intelligence. And so evolution tells us that billions of years ago nothing exploded, and out of all this mindlessness, and from dust clouds and mud and water, now we have all this intelligence. It doesn't work that way. Where does, as I asked before, where does information come from? I've often been a little put out with the modern liberal platform that says, okay, United States, well, you're the greatest in the world because, you know, you took it from somebody else. Now, these poor third world countries are the way they are because, well, they used to be smart, used to have this and that, and you took it from them. Really? Let's think about that for a minute. Let's think about information and intelligence. The Russians, there is no doubt that the Russian communists, they got their ability to build a nuclear warhead from who?
Germany.
But from us.
Well, primarily.
Basically, they got it by stealing the information. No question. They stole the information. But, let me ask you this. When they stole the information on how to build an atomic bomb, did that mean we could no longer build one? Or you stole the information, I don't have it anymore. Is that the way it works? If I know something, if I have information and you take it from me, does that mean I no longer have it? No. That's not the way intelligence, that's not the way information works. So even if I did steal information from you, that doesn't prevent you from using what you already have. Is the point I'm trying to make.
That's why the Chinese have done it. They've been stealing out.
And they steal a lot. But the point I'm making is just because the Chinese or whoever steals it doesn't mean we no longer have it. And so don't blame me for the way some other country lives as if I stole something from them. If I stole information from them, they would still have it. That makes no sense.
Well, that makes no sense anyway.
So, as you said, it's not like stealing possessions.
No.
Yes, if I steal your car, you no longer have that car. That's
You're
pretty
stealing
obvious.
mine, though.
Yeah,
But you don't steal the mind.
but I can't steal your mind. I can't steal your intelligence.
The other thing people need to understand, you might kill the man, but you never kill the idea. That's the danger.
And again, that's all part of intelligence and information.
There you go.
Ideas. Where did they come from? Where does intelligence come from? If there was never any intelligence to begin with, if all I had was nothing, or if all I had was mud, slime, and water, there'd still be no intelligence. This next one's pretty important. Morality demands a moral lawgiver. And this is another one of those areas where the atheist is really inconsistent. Because if an atheist is consistent, we'll leave it here. His position should be, there are no absolute morals. That should be his position. However, you go up to an atheist, here's your assignment, here's your homework for this week. Find you an atheist. Ask him if he believes in absolute morality. And let's say he says no. Well, then say, so, if according to my morality, it'd be okay for somebody to come in and rape your wife and kill your children, that'd be okay if it's okay for me. What's he going to say? No. There's always something that everyone will absolutely say is wrong. Under all circumstances,